Right, Reddit seemed to like the last one of these I did, so here I am again to ramble about another genre. And I actually have a script this time, so hopefully this won't be a lot more concise. This video is going to cover progressive house, and by progressive house I don't mean the in-your-face cashmere bullshit. I mean like the proper progressive stuff that builds throughout the track. So as the name suggests, the genre is all about progression, as in taking the same sections of composition and repeating it, and either slowly building on it or iterating it until it reaches a more intense climax for a short period of time. The tempo of the genre ranges dramatically, like this track's 123 beats per minute. One of my other progressive tracks has a tempo of 136, one of them has 137. It really does depend on the track and what kind of tempo suits the melody lines that you've composed. So, as with the last tutorial, I'm going to start off with the drop, as generally you can devise the rest of the track from the elements using the drop. And by drop, a lot of progressive house tracks don't really have a distinct drop. So when I say drop, I'm really saying when the hook of the track starts, when the main melody line starts. So like once you've got a good drop, you can use the ideas from it in the rest of the track, in the intro and the outro. So, start off with, I'm going to talk about your drum choice, and this really depends on what kind of track you're making. So this track is more mellow and relaxed in comparison to some progressive house tracks, so as a result I've used drum samples that aren't too in your face. For example, the kick. It's quite clicky as opposed to being like a big thumpy kick. It still has a fair amount of low end, so it still can drive the track, but it's not massive thumpy in your face. Of course, if you are creating a more in-your-face progressive track, you can use that kind of kick. So, for example, my track Axiom has that kind of kick going on. So that one has a more thumpier kick, and it goes well with a driving bass line, a kind of aggressive saw bass. And the clap should follow this rule as well. Like if you're making a more relaxed track, your clap should be more high end, maybe add a bit of a reverb like in this one. Like a lot of more EDM snares and claps have got that kind of low mid kind of. If I get an EQ up, actually, I'll you can get a lot of frequencies in this kind of area, but in this track the clap doesn't have that kind of frequency. It's mainly high end. Of course, once again, you could use claps that do sound like that. So once again, in Axiom, it's a lot more thumpier. But yeah, in terms of reverb, if you don't have these plugins, the Valhalla plugins are really good. I really recommend them. They're the best reverbs I've used in a long time. So with your hi-hats and stuff, you once again just choose the sound which is right for the track, and don't get too worked up about using drum loops either. What works, and if what works is a drum loop, then just fucking use it. It's really awful that people get so fucking stigmatized for using presets or loops, because at the end of the day, the majority of listeners can't either can't tell or just don't give a fuck either way. The only people that are going to notice are the producers, and if they shit on you for it, then they should really take a step back and reevaluate their lives, because at the end of the day, it really doesn't fucking matter. What sounds good sounds good. And this goes the same for presets as well. Like, sometimes once you've written a melody and you just can't think of the right sound for it, it just helps to scroll through presets. And if something fits, don't worry about using it, because, you know, what matters isn't if it's a preset. What matters if it sounds good. Although it is important to know how to make your own sounds, and sometimes just fucking around with VSTs can create some really interesting sounds that you might want to use in the track. So like in Serum, I've got I made a couple of preset packs simply just out of shit that I made randomly. So like that could be used in a bunch of different situations and shit like that. Like, you don't have to go in to your DAW with the express purpose of trying to make a track. You could just go in and do sound design, because at the end of the day, it really helps. Like, if you've made a melody and you can't think of a sound, just go through stuff that you've already made. There's no point in getting too overcomplicated in it either. Like, a lot of people, mainly the seamless crowd, are really addicted to only using Harmor or Serum, when there are much more simple ways of getting the sound you want without going through fucking hoops just to say, oh, I used Harmor to make this. And something that applies to all genres and not just progressive house is don't get into the habit of purely making tracks to show off your cool sound design. I know this video is about progressive house, but this point really applies most to the dubstep community. Like, yeah, you made a cool growl or FM square bass, but it sounds pretty similar to all the other growls or FM square basses, and as a result, the track just ends up sounding uninspired and bland. And of course, because this is a progressive house tutorial video, I'm going to show you how to make the dead mouse pluck. So you get your sawtooth wave, add some unison, a little bit of detune, get a filter, get an envelope, short decay, slap it on there. And that's it. You might want to play around with, resonance and reverb and compression, but that is literally it. Bam, you're done. So I'm going to talk about the progression now, because you've made your sounds, or you've found some sounds that you like, and you want to make a melody. So I'm not going to go in depth about music theory and stuff, because all of this is a creative process down to the individual producer. So I'm going to talk about how you can iterate on the same thing throughout the track to keep things interesting. So like in this track, the entire track is based around this one melody line. And there's only a few sections in the track where this isn't actually playing, so here, here, and here. To keep the melody line interesting, every now and then I layer it with this harmony line, and that's being played on the exact same synthesizer, so that goes like... And so when you put those together, it just adds a little variation, so from here to here, I'll just play it so you can see. Might be a little hard to hear with the art playing in the background, but that it just adds a little bit. Choosing where to place these variations matters a lot as well. Like placing that at the start of the drop would give the drop nowhere to go. Like the drop needs to evolve from kind of minimal to something a bit more climactic, so having that at the start would just kind of halt any progression in the drop. So I like to place it towards the end to give like a more climactic finish. Another variation in this is this one little pluck sound, this one that goes... And in the last section of the track, this moves from playing a single note to playing something more melodic. It's just little things like that that you can use to evolve the drop, as well as drums as well. Like here I start off the drop with literally just a kick drum and a bass. This little shaker as well, but and once I've brought the melody in, I add a clap. And then finally this hi-hat loop. A lot of progressive house doesn't actually have a melody during the drop. It uses chord progressions and shit like that, so I'm just going to open another project file here to show you that. $3 million years later. Alright, here we go. So here to start the drop off, the chords are playing a pretty simple progression. There's basically the same chord with some different note positions. So this is the piano roll for it, and it sounds like this. So as you might have heard there, the second loop of that added this little variation here. And this extra little note adds, basically just helps it rhythmically to evolve. It's long silence, of course. Fucking awkward. Like I said, these are normally rambly and shit. But yeah, after that loop, I layer another chord sound as well as this kind of drum loop. This just, once again, builds the energy for the track and just helps to build some anticipation for something bigger. So you go from... And another way to kind of help the track evolve is playing with filters. So this filter line here, this Serum 4 filter cuff-off, is fucking Donald Trump here, is the filter for the main chord sounds. So in this section here, you can hear it slowly open. So even there, once the filter closes again, the track actually feels more energetic despite actually having less layers of sound. So for example, before that you had this beep sound, you had this drum loop, you had the filter wide open, but once the filter closes again, it just goes back to the chords, and instead of these shit here, you've got this drone chord and a clap. So playing around with filters can really help drive the track, and it's an excellent use for transitions as well. So having like a sweeping high pass can really help go from one section to another. So just having that that lasts either 1 bar for a short transition or maybe 4 bars for a slightly longer one. And finally, with this kind of prog house, a good way to end the drop, this final climactic section, is just to have the filter open all the way. So this last little loop here, the filter's just completely open. So to transition from one section to another, you can... the way you go about that really determines the impact of the next section. So personally, I like slowly bringing elements of the drop in, so the actual transition to the drop isn't as jarring. So for example, in this section you have the arpeggio and all the shit from the intro playing, but the chord progression from the drop comes in. Although having a more kind of like instant transition can work as well. So going back to Axiom, this track goes from a kind of climactic choir section with an arpeggio into a much more minimal drop. So as long as the drop's impactful enough, like in that track it is minimal, but the bass and the drums keep the energy going. So for your effects and things, the style once again matters. So for example, in this track, because I've used melodic elements to build into other tracks, I've mainly kept the effects to more white noise and crashes and things like that. Although if you want something, you know, different than that, you can do more melodic stuff like the classic just rising pitch note. So you could just have your just slowly increasing in pitch. So yeah, melodic risers and downlifters can work as well in progressive house. So for the breakdown, once you've come out of the drop, what kind of breakdown you have is a completely creative choice. Like, you can either reuse elements of the drop in a more toned down style, like the first track I showed, or you can create something entirely new, like what's in this track. Just make sure whatever you make fits the atmosphere of the track. So here you go from the drop, which has this. So still using elements from the drop can help to kind of smooth the transition over. But later on, it reuses the chord progression, but instead of having the main chord synth, it uses this one, which is a kind of more pad sound, and uses arpeggios to drive this section of the track. Generally you should remove the kick drum and the snare drum from this section, as that way when they come back in the drop they have a lot more impact. So I like to keep my breakdowns to stuff that's only hi-hats, or in this case tribal drums. Removing the drums, yeah, it just makes them more impactful when it goes back into the drop. And you should also find a good way to transition back into the build of the track. So from the breakdown to the build, in this track, the progression of the track just halts, so it just plays the same section over and over again. And then when the elements from the drop start coming in, I just slowly filter them out until you've just got those elements. So for the intro, you want to start out quite minimal. So in this track, you've just got a couple of synth sounds, which is the beep and this chord, or you can just use drums. Like Fax in Berlin by Deadmau5 is a good example of how to start a track, a progressive house track with just a drum loop, but that has the kick, the clap, hi-hat, and a cowbell. I'm not going to play it, so I don't get fucking striked, but if you haven't heard it yet, there's plenty of uploads on YouTube. And once you've got some synths going, you can build up more synths until you bring in some chords and arpeggios. In this track, the intro goes in a more cut down version of the breakdown, having only one chord play, and instead having the arp and the bass drive this section. And in the other track I showed you, the intro is literally that same arpeggio line, but it just slowly brings in some chords and other harmonies and melody lines. The outro is probably the easiest thing you're going to make, because you can either use bits of the breakdown or intro and just slowly cut them down, or in this case you can use bits of the drop and slowly cut them down. So like from here you go from the most climactic section to a section which was pretty early on in the drop, and then you just cut elements out until you can end it. So in this way I just bring it to a close with some effects, and you could do that with filters or whatever really. And your track length, how long you make it, is completely down to how long you can iterate on a section, or how many different compositions you can create that all fit well with each other. You should give your track enough room to evolve without feeling forced, but at the same time you need to keep the interest of your listeners up. So this track here is around 7.5 minutes long, but one of my other progressive tracks is 15.5 minutes long. It really does depend on the track, basically. So that's all I've got to say about this genre, really. I hope this has helped at least some of you with producing the progressive house genre, and thanks for watching.